Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you've had your coffee or your matcha or your bioengineered nutrient paste, whatever gets you going.
Right.
Because today we are staring directly into the engine of the future. And let me tell you, the check engine light is definitely not on. It is running hot.
But it's white hot.
We are talking about a convergence of technology, ambition, and history that is honestly a little overwhelming to get your head around.
It really is. I mean, usually when we sit down to go through the stack of sources, we're looking at these isolated verticals.
Exactly.
Here's a tech story, here's a political update, here's a weird science fact. But today, the stack you've put together suggests that these silos aren't just leaking into each other. They're collapsing.
They're completely collapsing. We are seeing a massive merger of space exploration and artificial intelligence that is going to reshape, well, pretty much the entire board.
The entire playing field. And it's happening faster than I think anyone predicted.
Exactly. We're kicking things off with the headline that I think broke the financial internet this morning. Elon Musk has merged SpaceX with his AI company, XAI. And the numbers attached to this, they are absolutely eye-watering. But that's just the tip of the iceberg.
What is? The money is the headline, But the engineering.
Yeah.
The engineering is the real story here.
So our mission today is to take you from that trillion-dollar boardroom deal all the way to the surface of Mars, and then hold on tight, we're going to dive down to the bottom of the ocean.
And even dig through some mud.
And even dig up some 400,000-year-old mud in Greece. It's a trip.
It's a journey from the very cutting edge of fusion energy, tiny lunchbox-sized fusion reactors, all the way back to the dawn of human tool-making. And what's wild is how connected all of it is.
It really is. We've got a stack that includes breaking financial news, deep space research papers from the James Webb Space Telescope, archaeological reports that are rewriting the history books, and some incredibly tense geopolitical updates from pretty much every corner of the globe.
If I had to put a theme on today's dive, I'd probably call it Accelerating Futures and Unearthed Pasts.
I like that.
It feels like technology is rushing us forward at Mach speed, while the Earth itself is cracking open, sometimes literally, as we'll see in Africa, to reveal new history.
I love that. Accelerating futures and unearthed pasts. So let's not waste a second. Let's start with the big one, the trillion-dollar convergence.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Elon Musk. Love him or hate him, the guy knows how to dominate a news cycle. But this isn't just a tweet. This is SpaceX acquiring XAI.
A formal acquisition.
And the implied value of this new combined entity is just staggering. We're talking $1.25 trillion.
That number. It's hard to even process. It makes it the most valuable private company in the world by a long shot. It just eclipses giants like ByteDance or even OpenAI.
Right.
But I think if you just look at the price tag, you're missing the point entirely.
Oh, absolutely.
This isn't just a financial transaction where money moves from one of his pockets to another. This is a strategic realignment of how humanity interacts with data and with space.
Right, because on the surface, the average person might think, okay, rocket company buys chatbot company, what's the connection? But the strategic logic is way, way deeper, isn't it? And Musk himself is calling it an innovation engine.
He is. And here is where it gets really fascinating. To understand this deal, you have to understand the single biggest constraint on artificial intelligence right now.
And it's not what you think.
It isn't code. It isn't even really the data anymore. It isn't even the chips. Not really.
It's energy.
It's energy.
Electrons.
Raw power. AI data centers are incredibly, unbelievably power hungry. We are talking about facilities that consume as much electricity as medium-sized cities.
I saw a report that some of these new clusters they're planning could each require their own dedicated power plant.
I believe it. They are straining power grids on Earth to the breaking point. You have utility companies in places like Virginia and Ireland, major data center hubs saying, stop, we physically cannot plug in any more GPU clusters.
We're full, no more room at the inn.
Literally, the grid can't handle it. And meanwhile, you have SpaceX, which has the Starship, the biggest rocket ever conceived, designed for massive payloads.
The ultimate heavy lift vehicle.
Exactly. So the synergy here, and this is the part that sounds like science fiction, but is now actually becoming a formal business plan, is about moving that entire energy-hungry infrastructure off-planet.
Okay, let's unpack that for a second, because that is a dense concept. So instead of building a giant data center in, say, the Arizona desert and then building a new power plant to run it,
Right.
you launch the servers themselves into space.
You launch the servers, you launch the cooling systems, and you launch the power source. Think about the environment you have in orbit. First, you have access to solar energy 24/7.
No night, no clouds.
No clouds, no atmospheric interference scattering the photons. You have a raw, unfiltered, completely unlimited fusion reactor, our sun, just sitting right there. Constant free energy.
So you have the power source, but what about the other side of the equation? The heat. I thought electronics hated heat, and data centers on Earth spend a fortune on cooling.
That is the #1 engineering challenge. It's counterintuitive, but in a vacuum, getting rid of heat is actually very hard because there's no air to carry it away through convection.
Right.
So you need massive radiators. But on the flip side, you also have the intense cold of deep space right there in the shade. So the engineering puzzle is all about thermal management. But if you solve that, you have free energy and free cooling. You process the data in orbit, and you just beam the results back down.
It completely alleviates the pressure on Earth's power grid.
It does.
You're essentially outsourcing our heaviest cognitive lifting to the sky.
Precisely. And to make any of that happen, you need a launch vehicle that can carry ridiculously heavy payloads cheaply and frequently. You need to lift thousands of tons of servers, solar arrays, and radiators.
That's Starship.
That's the Starship program. It's the linchpin. Musk is talking about a future with up to 1 million Starlink satellites to support this kind of infrastructure.
1 million satellites.
1 million?
I mean, it's hard to even visualize that. We worry about space junk now with just a few thousand active satellites. 1 million is a different paradigm.
It is a swarm, a literal Dyson swarm in the making, albeit a very, very thin one. And it completely changes the architecture of the internet and global computing. It moves the cloud from being a metaphor for a server farm in Ohio
To being literal.
to being a literal cloud of computers above the actual clouds.
But it's not just Musk playing this game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I saw mentions of Jeff Bezos and Google in the notes. They can't be sitting this out.
Oh, you can't make a move with a $1 trillion valuation without waking up the neighbors. Of course not. Bezos, with Blue Origin and Google, are absolutely exploring their own solar-powered solutions in space.
So this is the new space race.
It's the new industrial race. It's no longer just about who gets to the moon first or who plants a flag on Mars. It's about who builds the power plant and the server room in orbit. It's the industrialization of low Earth orbit.
It makes you wonder what happens to the software down here on Earth while all the hardware goes up to space. And, I mean, speaking of AI eating the world, we have to touch on a piece of news that hit the creative industry pretty hard this week.
Yeah.
Adobe Animate is shutting down.
Yeah, this one stings for the nostalgia crowd. I felt this one.
I mean, this software traces its lineage all the way back to 1996. For our listeners who might be a bit younger, this was originally called Flash.
Macromedia Flash,
Gee.
the pillar of the early internet.
Right. If you were on the internet in the early 2000s, I'm talking Newgrounds, Homestar Runner, those jagged little stick figure fights.
All of it. The entire creative output of the internet for a decade ran on Flash.
That was the internet. And now Adobe is killing it to focus entirely on its AI technologies.
It's a signal, and it's loud and clear. The era of manual, frame-by-frame creation of the tweening, where you have to move a dot from point A to point B, is being officially sunsetted in favor of generative models.
It's the same accelerating future theme we talked about.
Exactly. Legacy tools, even the ones that literally built the modern web, are being swept aside for AI.
It's efficient, sure, I get the business case. But does it feel a little bit like we're losing the craft of it? I mean, there's something about the limitation of the tool that created the unique style of that era.
That's the eternal question with any automation, isn't it? When you remove the friction, do you also remove the soul? But from a business perspective, Adobe is betting that the future isn't about clicking a mouse to draw a line.
No.
It's about describing a scene to an algorithm. You know, make me a cartoon about a cat in space in the style of a 1950s comic book, and boom, it exists.
Which brings us right back to the immense energy required to run that algorithm.
And back to space. It's a loop.
It is. But let's go further out. Let's talk about Mars. Because while Musk is building the data centers in orbit, the race to actually get people to the red planet is heating up, and the competition isn't who you might expect.
No, It's not just the private companies anymore. It's a major geopolitical contender stepping back into the ring with a very, very bold claim.
Russia.
Russia. Rosatom, that's Russia's state nuclear corporation, says they're developing something called a magnetoplasma rocket.
And the stat that just jumped off the page at me.
Right.
They claim they can reduce travel time to Mars from the standard 6 to 9 months.
Which is a long, long time to be in a tin can.
Down to just 30 days, 1 month.
If, and I want to put a huge asterisk on this, if that's true, it changes the entire equation of interplanetary travel. It's a revolution.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does a magnetoplasma rocket even work? It sounds like something from Star Trek. Is this real physics?
It's based on very real physics, but the engineering is incredibly, incredibly difficult. Think of it this way. Conventional rockets, like the ones NASA's SLS or SpaceX's Falcon 9 use, are all based on chemical combustion.
Right, you light a fuel, it explodes.
You burn a fuel, hot gas expands and shoots out the back, and Newton's third law pushes you forward. But chemical rockets are fundamentally inefficient. They're powerful, but they run out of gas very, very fast.
Okay.
A plasma engine, on the other hand, uses powerful electromagnetic fields to accelerate ions, which is plasma, to incredibly high velocities.
So you're not burning anything?
No. We're talking about stripping electrons off atoms of a gas, like argon or xenon, creating a plasma, and then using magnets to shoot those ions out the back at speeds way, way higher than burning gas can ever achieve.
So it's like an ion drive, but on steroids?
Essentially, yes. That's a good way to put it. The specific impulse, that's the key efficiency metric for a rocket engine, is off the charts. The exhaust velocity is much, much higher, which means you can keep accelerating for a much longer time.
Ah, so you don't just do one big burn and then coast for 9 months.
Exactly. You keep pushing. You're constantly gently accelerating for weeks. That's how you cut the travel time from 9 months to 1. Rosatom is aiming for a flight-ready engine by 2030.
2030 is right around the corner in aerospace terms. That's essentially tomorrow. That sounds almost unbelievable.
It's an incredibly aggressive timeline. But the challenges are immense. I mean, you're dealing with extreme temperatures.
Hotter than the sun, I'd imagine.
Plasma that is hotter than the surface of the sun, yes. You need materials that can maintain a powerful magnetic containment field while all that is happening inside. And you need to run it continuously for weeks at a time without it melting your spaceship into a puddle.
So high risk, but unbelievably high reward.
Absolutely. If they pull it off, a 1-month trip to Mars makes colonization way more feasible. You don't have to worry nearly as much about cosmic radiation exposure or bone density loss if the trip is that short.
Radiation's the big one.
Exactly. Radiation is the potential killer on a 9-month trip, on a 30-day trip. It's a manageable risk. It's a total game changer.
Meanwhile, back here in the United States, NASA is dealing with the much more gritty reality of current rocket technology. We have an update on Artemis II.
Yeah, the wet dress rehearsal for the SLS, the Space Launch System.
Yeah.
And it didn't go perfectly, did it?
No, they faced more fuel leaks. They were in the process of loading 700,000 gallons of supercooled propellant liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. That's the wet part of the rehearsal.
And things started to leak.
Yep. The chill down of the core stage revealed some issues with the seals.
You know, liquid hydrogen is an absolute nightmare to work with. It's just notoriously difficult.
Why is that specifically?
It's the smallest molecule in the universe, hydrogen. It wants to escape. If there's a microscopic gap in a seal, a tiny imperfection, hydrogen will find it and leak through. And it has to be kept at these absolute extremes of cold. We're talking minus 423 degrees Fahrenheit. So when you pump that into a rocket that's been sitting in the hot Florida sun, the thermal shock is massive.
Things contract.
Things shrink, seals can crack. It's a huge engineering challenge every single time.
And because of this latest leak, the launch target has slipped again, right?
Yes. The new target is now March 2026. And look, it's frustrating, but it's a reminder that even with all our advanced tech, handling cryogenic fuels at that scale is dangerous and very, very difficult.
And this is the first crewed mission of the program.
It is. They're sending humans around the moon for the first time in over 50 years. NASA absolutely cannot afford a mistake.
Safety first, of course. But it's just so interesting to contrast the slow, methodical, grinding struggle of Artemis with the incredibly ambitious 30-day claims coming out of Russia.
Well, it's the difference between operational reality, what actually happens when you try to pump 700,000 gallons of fuel into the rocket on the pad, and developmental ambition. You know, what the math says is possible on a whiteboard.
That's a great way to put it. Now, why are we even going to Mars in the first place, besides the adventure of it all? Well, the planet itself keeps giving us more and more reasons to visit. we have a new discovery: bleached rocks.
This is a really key clue for the planetary geologists. These bleached rocks, found on the Martian surface by one of the rovers, suggest a much wetter and probably warmer past than the cold, dry desert we see today.
Okay, when you say bleached, what does that actually imply? Like, did someone spill Clorox on them?
No, not Clorox.
Yeah.
It implies a specific kind of chemical weathering. On Earth, when we see red rock, like iron-rich rock that has turned white or pale like this, it's usually because water has flowed through it for a very long time.
Leaching out the minerals.
Exactly. Leaching out the iron and other minerals that give it its color. Think of the red sandstone you see in Utah. If you ran water through that for 1,000,000 years, it would eventually lose that color and turn pale.
So it's basically a smoking gun for liquid water having been present.
It's a very, very strong fingerprint. The debate now is really about the timeline. Was this ancient water from billions of years ago when Mars had oceans? Or was there a more recent geological event that involved water?
And either way, it points to habitability.
That's the key. If there was liquid water and there was geothermal heat, the core ingredients for life, as we know it, were there at some point.
It's amazing. We're literally mapping the history of a dead planet while simultaneously trying to figure out how to live on it.
And speaking of mapping history and invisible things, let's zoom out. Way out, beyond Mars, beyond the solar system entirely.
Section 3. Unveiling the universe. We have a new map, and it's a map of something we can't even see.
The dark matter map. Astronomers using the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST, have created the most detailed map of dark matter ever produced.
I always struggle with this concept. Dark matter makes up, what, 85% of all the mass in the universe?
Yep.
But we can't see it. We can't touch it.
Right. It's completely invisible. It doesn't reflect light. It doesn't emit light. It doesn't interact with normal matter at all, except through gravity. It's passing right through us right now.
But it has gravity.
It has gravity, and that's the only way we know it's there. So we map it by looking at how its gravity bends the light of galaxies that are located behind it from our perspective.
Like a lens, a cosmic lens.
Exactly. It's called gravitational lensing. If you look at a very distant galaxy and its image appears smeared or distorted,
Yeah.
you know, there is a massive clump of something invisible in front of it causing that distortion.
So by analyzing the smearing, you can sort of draw the invisible blob.
You can reverse engineer the map of the invisible blob. And what this new map tells us is it reveals the hidden structure, the scaffolding of the entire universe.
The cosmic web.
That's it. It shows how dark matter clumped together billions of years ago, right after the Big Bang, creating these deep gravity wells that then pulled in normal matter, gas, and dust to form the very first stars and galaxies.
So without this invisible ghost stuff, we literally wouldn't be here.
We wouldn't have galaxies. The gas would have just floated around forever, too diffused to ever form stars. Dark matter is the glue, the secret ingredient holding the entire cosmos together.
And while the JWST is looking at the invisible, AI is going back and looking at the visible in a new way. This story blew my mind, an AI reviewing old Hubble archives.
This is a perfect example of AI as a tool for discovery, not just for, creating images or text. We have petabytes of data from the Hubble Space Telescope going back decades.
A treasure trove.
It is.
Yeah.
But humans have mostly just looked at the pretty pictures. An AI algorithm was tasked to go through the raw data, pixel by pixel, and it found hundreds of cosmic anomalies that human eyes had just glazed over for years.
Anomalies like what? What did we miss?
All sorts of things. Weird asteroid tracks that no one had cataloged, faint gravitational lenses that we hadn't noticed, the remnants of supernovas that had faded.
Yeah.
It changes how we do science.
So we don't just need new telescopes.
We don't. We need to look at the old data with new eyes, with digital eyes. The AI doesn't get tired. It doesn't get bored. It looks at the millionth star with the exact same focus and intensity as it looked at the first one.
And then we get to the part of the show where things get a little speculative, but it's in the sources, parallel universes.
The multiverse. Always a fun topic.
The outline here mentions this concept of our universe being just one bubble in a froth of universes, and it connects to aliens.
This is where theoretical physics crashes into astrobiology. The idea is that if the multiverse theory is correct, and the math in things like string theory allows for it, then the probability of life existing somewhere goes from maybe to, well, inevitable.
Because if you roll the dice an infinite number of times, eventually you're going to get double sixes.
Exactly. You're going to get every possible combination. Even if the conditions for life are incredibly, vanishingly rare, in an infinite multiverse, it must exist, probably in infinite variations.
But could we ever contact them? Or are they just next door in a dimension we can't access? That's the real question.
That is the trillion-dollar question. Some theorists speculate that gravity might be the one force that can leak between universes.
I've heard that.
That's actually one of the leading theories for why gravity is so much weaker than the other fundamental forces. Maybe it's because it's being diluted across multiple dimensions.
That's a wild thought.
It's highly speculative, obviously, but it's just interesting that serious scientific discourse is slowly moving away from, is there life out there, to, in which of the infinite dimensions does the other life exist?
From the very edges of the multiverse, let's bring it all the way back down to Earth. Because while the universe is expanding, our own planet is, well, it's splitting.
It is literally tearing itself apart. We're going to East Africa.
The East African Rift, I've heard of this, but the update in the sources here is concerning. It seems to be speeding up.
It's a geological process that normally takes millions and millions of years. But the new research suggests that human activity and climate change are accelerating some of the symptoms. The focus here is on Lake Turkana in the Kenyan Rift Valley.
And the water levels there have dropped massively.
By 150 meters. A catastrophic drop. Now, you have to remember that water is incredibly heavy. Imagine holding a bucket of water. It's heavy.
Right.
Now imagine a lake the size of an inland sea. All of that weight pushes down on the Earth's crust. It acts like a giant clamp, holding the tectonic plates together.
So when all that water evaporates due to drought and climate change, that weight is removed.
The pressure is released. The clamp is gone. And because this is already a seismically active zone where the Nubian tectonic plate is pulling away from the Somali plate,
It's like taking your foot off the brake.
that's a perfect analogy. Removing that water weight is triggering increased seismic activity. It's making the ground move and rift apart more easily.
So eventually, this rift actually splits the continent.
Eventually, yes.
Yes.
The land will sink low enough that the Indian Ocean will flood in. Africa will physically split into two separate landmasses with a brand new ocean in between. We are watching a new map of the world being born in geological slow motion.
Wow.
It's a process called isostasy. The crust is literally rebounding because the weight that was holding it down is gone.
That is wild. And it connects directly back to climate. Speaking of which, we have a really mixed bag of climate news. Some scary, but some genuinely hopeful. Let's talk about this carbon-to-fuel breakthrough.
This is a really nice win for chemistry. A new study details a catalyst based on manganese. And what it does is it converts CO2, the greenhouse gas that's warming the planet, into something called formate.
And formate is a fuel source.
It's a stable way to store and transport hydrogen. It can be used directly in certain types of fuel cells.
So why is manganese the important part here? Why not just use, I don't know, gold or platinum or whatever they were using before?
Cost and durability, that's the whole game.
Yeah.
Previous catalysts that could do this used rare, incredibly expensive precious metals like platinum or palladium.
So it worked in a lab, but you could never scale it.
You could never scale it. It would be too expensive. Manganese, on the other hand, is cheap. It's one of the most abundant metals in the Earth's crust. And this new catalyst is also more durable. It means the process of scrubbing CO2 from the air and turning it into a useful fuel might actually become economically viable.
That's huge. It turns a waste product that's killing us into a valuable resource.
That's the dream of carbon capture.
And we're seeing a similar kind of innovation in nuclear fusion, too, a company called Avalanche Energy.
They just raised $29 million. But what's really fascinating is their approach. We usually think of fusion reactors as these massive building-sized donuts, these tokamaks like ITER in France.
Right. Billions of dollars, decades to build.
Decades. Avalanche is trying to build small-scale fusion devices.
Wait, like desktop fusion?
Maybe not quite desktop, but think lunchbox-sized modules that you can then stack together. Imagine a server rack, but instead of computing, the rack is generating immense amounts of clean power.
That's a completely different philosophy.
It is. Instead of building one giant artificial sun, their idea is to build thousands of tiny, manageable stars. It's a distributed approach.
I love that. And then we have another company, Vema, that's drilling for hydrogen.
For natural hydrogen. They sometimes call it gold hydrogen or white hydrogen. For a long time, geologists thought that pure hydrogen didn't really exist in large pockets underground, that it was always bound up in water or hydrocarbons.
But they were wrong.
They were wrong. It turns out there are geological processes that create and trap vast reserves of pure hydrogen. Vema is one of the companies at the forefront of drilling to find them.
And what are they planning to use it for?
The primary target market, data centers.
Of course, it all loops right back to the SpaceX and AI story.
Everyone is hunting for clean, reliable, high-density energy sources.
Everyone. And that hunt inevitably leads to conflict. There's a legal battle brewing in the UK involving a company called Glomar Minerals and the activist group Greenpeace.
Deep sea mining. This is the next big environmental battleground. This is taking place in the Pacific Ocean, in an area called the Clarion-Clipperton Zone. They're after something called polymetallic nodules.
That sounds like something from a video game. What are they?
They literally look like lumpy black potatoes, just sitting on the abyssal plain miles down on the seafloor. But they are packed with nickel, cobalt, manganese, all the metals you need for batteries.
Those are battery metals.
Exactly. Glomar wants to send down huge harvesting machines to scoop them up. Greenpeace and other groups are arguing that dredging the deep sea floor will destroy unique, untouched ecosystems that we haven't even properly studied or named yet.
So it's that classic battle. We need these metals for the green transition, for electric vehicles and grid-scale batteries. But the process of getting them might destroy the very environment we're trying to save.
It's a rock in a hard place. Or, I guess, a nodule in a hard place.
And just to remind us all that the Earth is ultimately in charge no matter what we do. A 4.2 magnitude earthquake hit San Francisco.
A little wake-up call for the Bay Area. They're always waiting for the big one. A 4.2 is relatively small, but it's a good reminder that those tectonic plates are always moving underfoot.
Definitely. Let's shift gears. We've looked at the far future. We've looked at the present-day Earth. Now let's dig up the past. Section 5. Archaeology. And this first story about wooden tools in Greece. This is rewriting the timeline of human ingenuity, isn't it?
It completely challenges our understanding of early humans. We are at the Marathousa archaeological site in Greece, and they found wooden tools dating back 430,000 years.
430,000 years. Now, why is finding wood so special? We find stone tools from that era all the time.
Because stone survives. Wood rots. If you drop a stick in the forest, it's gone in 10 years, maybe 20. Finding wood from almost 500,000 years ago is miraculous.
So how did it survive?
It only happened because these tools were preserved in waterlogged layers of sediment without any oxygen. It's called anaerobic preservation. The bacteria that cause decay couldn't survive.
So what does this actually tell us about the people or hominins who made them back then?
It tells us they weren't just banging rocks together. Woodworking requires significant planning and foresight. You have to select the right kind of branch, strip the bark, shape it, maybe harden the tip with fire.
It's a multi-step process.
The complex process. It implies a much higher level of cognitive ability and resourcefulness than we often gave them credit for. These were likely Homo heidelbergensis, an ancestor of Neanderthals and us, and they were skilled craftsmen.
That's incredible. It sort of fills in the blank spots in the historical record. We thought they were simple because the complex stuff they made just rotted away.
Exactly. It's a classic case of absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
And moving a bit closer to modern history, let's talk about Hannibal.
The Carthaginian general who crossed the Alps, a legendary figure.
With elephants. Which, let's be honest, has always sounded a little bit like a myth. I mean, can you imagine getting elephants over the Alps? But they found a bone.
A single bone in Cordoba, Spain.
No.
A solitary elephant bone found on a battlefield from that period.
Could it actually be from one of Hannibal's war elephants?
The context fits perfectly. It's
Yeah.
from the era of the Second Punic War. So it could be Hannibal's, or to be fair, it could potentially be from Julius Caesar's army during a later campaign. But finding it right alongside 17 catapult bullets.
Which are basically giant stone cannonballs.
Exactly, giant stone balls used for siege warfare. It grounds the legend in physical reality.
It wasn't just a story some historian wrote down. There was actually an elephant that died on a battlefield in Spain 2,000 years ago.
History is tangible. It's not just text in a book. It's bones and stones in the ground.
It is. And unfortunately, conflict is also very tangible in the present day. Let's move to Section 6, Global Geopolitics and Conflict.
Yeah, this is a heavy section. We have some serious updates from multiple fronts.
We have to start with Russia and Ukraine. The outline mentions the gas wars. This isn't a new phenomenon, is it?
No, not at all. The source material does a great job of contextualizing this. The conflict we see today has deep roots in energy politics. It isn't just about territory, it's about pipelines. Since the 1990s, Russia relied on Ukraine as the primary transit route to get its natural gas to its rich customers in Europe. And Ukraine, in turn, relied on the billions it made from those transit fees.
A forced economic marriage.
A very unhappy one. And pipelines like Nord Stream, which went under the Baltic Sea directly to Germany, were explicitly designed to bypass Ukraine and remove that leverage.
Which brings us to today. Russia has launched a massive new wave of strikes.
Yes, 70 missiles, 450 drones, according to the reports.
And they're targeting energy infrastructure again?
Yes. This seems to be the end of a brief energy truce that had been in place for a few weeks. And we have reports of direct strikes on the capital, Kiev, and on Novaya Kakhovka.
3 civilians were killed in that attack, according to the report.
And yet, amidst all these missiles and drums, there are diplomatic talks scheduled.
In Abu Dhabi. U.S.-backed. It's that strange duality of modern warfare, isn't it? You're fighting and talking at the same time, but tensions are incredibly high.
Well, it's leverage, right?
Yeah.
You strike hard to try and improve your position at the negotiating table.
Moving south to the Middle East, Gaza and Rafah.
The border crossing there reopened, but we have to be really clear about the scale of this. It reopened for very limited medical evacuations. The number cited was 5 patients.
5 out of a reported 22,000 who are in urgent need of care.
Drop in the bucket doesn't even begin to cover it.
Yeah.
It just highlights the sheer scale of the humanitarian bottleneck there.
And a very worrying allegation coming from the blue line. That's the demarcation line, the border between Lebanon and Israel.
The chemical allegation.
Yes. Israel has been accused of releasing a non-toxic chemical substance. We don't have independent verification of what it was, but whatever it was, it caused UN peacekeepers UNIFIL to suspend their patrols in the area.
And that is a significant breakdown in protocol. If the UN observers stop patrolling, you lose the neutral eyes on the ground. That dramatically increases the risk of a miscalculation or an accidental escalation.
And there's a pause on U.S. military action against Iran.
Yes, according to the sources. It seems that Russia and Turkey are acting as mediators to try and revive the nuclear talks. It feels like everyone is trying to pull back from the brink of a wider regional war.
Meanwhile, on the economic front, a major update involving the U.S. and India. President Trump and Prime Minister Modi have finalized a significant trade deal.
This is a big one. The report mentions President Trump calling Modi a great friend. The core of the deal is that the U.S. will lower reciprocal tariffs on Indian goods from 25% down to 18%.
That's a pretty substantial cut.
It is. It signals a major thaw in economic relations, which had been pretty tense. This move suggests the White House is prioritizing its strategic alliance with India, most likely as a counterweight to China's influence in the region.
It's geopolitics played through tax rates.
It always is.
And then we get to Venezuela. This story is confusing, to say the least. It's a mess of conflicting narratives.
It is a narrative minefield. Here are the facts we can piece together from the reports. Venezuelan oil exports have surged. They're up to 800,000 barrels per day as of January 2026.
Which would imply that U.S. sanctions were lifted.
Yes. The source explicitly mentions the end of an oil blockade. But the reason for that is the twist. There are reports of the capturing of Nicolas Maduro by the United States.
Capturing, but then we also have reports that the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, is meeting with U.S. envoys.
Exactly. And we have testimony from some sources calling it a kidnapping versus the official U.S. narrative, which is probably framing it as a legitimate transition of power. It's a chaotic power vacuum, or a transition, depending on who you ask.
But the bottom line is that the oil is flowing again, which is the big geopolitical marker that the global market watches.
That's right.
We'll have to keep a very close eye on that one. Let's move closer to home. Society and justice. The Epstein files, they just will not go away.
And they shouldn't. Not until there is some form of genuine accountability.
New files were released, unredacted, and according to the reports, they contain extremely graphic details, and some very big names are scrambling.
Bill and Hillary Clinton have agreed to testify before Congress.
That's to avoid a contempt of Congress vote, right?
Correct. It's a legal maneuver, but it puts them on the record under oath.
Yeah.
And we also saw emails surface regarding Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, showing she asked Jeffrey Epstein for business advice while he was in prison for sex offenses.
That is a staggering lapse in judgment, to put it as mildly as possible.
The public reaction is, as you'd expect, furious. But there's also a backlash against the Department of Justice because in the rush to release these documents, some of the unredacted files apparently violated the privacy of the victims.
So it's a complete mess.
It is. Everyone is demanding justice, but the process of getting there is proving to be incredibly messy and damaging in its own right.
Speaking of justice delayed, the case of Steve Wright in the UK.
Right, the man convicted of being the Suffolk Strangler. He's now confessed to the murder of a teenager, a separate case, after 26 years.
26 years of waiting and uncertainty for that family.
It just shows the value of cold case persistence. New evidence, new DNA techniques, and just relentless pressure eventually work.
And in Norway, a major royal scandal. Marius Borghebe, who is the son of Norway's crown princess, has been arrested and charged with rape just before he was scheduled to stand trial on a separate matter.
Between this and the Sarah Ferguson emails, it's a very tough week for European royalty.
It certainly strips away the glamour and shows the very raw human flaws.
Just one more note on justice in Minneapolis. In the U.S., Homeland Security officers are finally being issued body cameras.
So this is a transparency move.
It is. For a long time, federal agents have often been exempt from the body cam rules that most local police departments have to follow. This move is meant to close that gap. The thinking is, if you have a badge and a gun, you should have a camera rolling.
Makes sense. Section 8, Technology in Daily Life. How is all this high-level tech actually hitting us regular folks?
Well, privacy continues to be the main battleground. Mozilla's Firefox browser is implementing a generative AI kill switch.
I love the name. A button to just say no to AI?
Essentially, yes. It lets users globally block any and all generative AI features within the browser. It's a direct reaction to the AI everywhere all the time trend. Some people just want a browser to be a browser, not a chatbot.
I can relate to that. And then there's Ring, the doorbell camera company. They have a new feature called Search Party.
This one is pretty controversial. On the surface, it sounds great. It uses a network of your neighbor's cameras to help you find your lost dog.
Sounds helpful. I mean, who doesn't want to find a lost puppy?
Of course.
Yeah.
But the privacy concern is that it's an opt-out system. If you own a Ring camera, are you automatically part of this neighborhood surveillance grid unless you specifically say no? It blurs the line between your private security and a community-wide surveillance network.
You become a deputy in the neighborhood watch by default.
That's a good way to put it. And underpinning all of this, the internet itself. We have a report on undersea cables.
Right.
99% of all international internet traffic flows through these fiber optic cables laid on the ocean floor. There was a summit in Portugal recently addressing just how fragile this system is.
We always worry about state-sponsored cyber warfare, but a fishing trawler accidentally dragging its anchor can take out an entire country's internet connection.
Exactly. The report says human activity, accidental activity, causes most of the damage. We have built this incredible digital world on a very physical, very vulnerable foundation of plastic tubes lying on the seafloor.
And finally, a quick look at a couple of consumer shifts. Grubhub is waiving delivery fees.
On orders over $50, yes. It's a clear move to try and win back market share from competitors like DoorDash. The delivery wars just continue to rage on.
And China is banning hidden door handles on cars.
For safety reasons, yeah. You know those sleek flush door handles that pop out electronically when you unlock the car?
Yeah, they look very futuristic.
They do. But if the car loses power in an accident, first responders can't open the doors from the outside. So China is mandating a return to mechanical handles. It's a case of function over form.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have. My head is spinning a bit.
So what does this all mean? We started with Elon Musk merging two of his giant companies to launch data centers into orbit. We looked at Russia trying to sprint to Mars on a plasma rocket. And we dug up 430,000-year-old wooden tools in Greece.
For me, this synthesis is all about the contrast. This incredible, almost dizzying contrast. We are reaching for the stars with this trillion-dollar technology, trying to escape Earth's physical limits.
Right.
But we are constantly being pulled back by these very earthly realities, by politics and conflict in Ukraine, by tectonic plates literally splitting apart in Africa, by the simple biological reality of needing water and protection from radiation to survive on Mars.
And the history, too. Finding that wooden tool is such a grounding reminder that we've been innovators for 500,000 years. The tool has changed from a sharpened stick to a plasma rocket, but the fundamental human drive is exactly the same.
It is. We are tool builders. That is our species' signature move.
I want to end on a human note. Amidst all this global chaos, the wars, the mergers, the earthquakes, there was a small story about a 13-year-old boy named Austin.
The swimmer in Australia.
In Australia, yeah. He swam against a powerful rip current to save his family who had been swept out to sea. The news called it a superhuman feat of strength and endurance for a kid that age.
It's just a powerful reminder that individual courage and fears will still matter immensely. Technology is great, fusion is great, but the human spirit is what saves us in the immediate moment.
Absolutely. And with that, I want to leave our listener with one final provocative thought. We talked about the parallel universe theory earlier in the show.
The multiverse, yeah.
If the physics really does imply that other versions of reality exist, are there versions where the history we discussed today took a different path? Is there a universe where the East African rift never opened, where Hannibal's elephant actually made it home safely, where the peace talks in Abu Dhabi succeeded instantly?
And if those other realities do exist, does that change how we value this one? Does it make our choices here more or less important? Do we fight harder for this one because it's the only one we can actually touch?
Something to think about as you go about your day. Thanks for diving deep with us. See you next time.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to the debate. It is Tuesday, February 3, 2026.
And the ground is definitely shifting beneath our feet.
Today we're looking at the state of the global order. And it's a strange morning. I mean, if you look at the financial tickers, you see green arrows all across Asia, the U.S. futures market. But then you look at the geopolitical map, and you just see red alarms. So we have to ask, are we witnessing a stabilization through this kind of high-level transactional diplomacy? Or is the world actually fracturing into these volatile resource-hoarding blocks?
That really is the central question of the year, isn't it? While the stock markets are climbing this morning and, trade deals are being signed in Washington, missiles are striking energy grids in Ukraine. And these massive tech mergers, they're concentrating power in ways we have never seen before. It really feels like we're living in two different realities.
I think those realities are starting to merge, actually. My take on this is that we're seeing a return to realpolitik, a harsh but maybe a necessary form of pragmatic stabilization where economic interests are finally overriding that ideological gridlock we've been stuck in.
See, I look at the exact same data points and I see the complete opposite. I see these so-called deals as superficial bandages over, deepening resource wars, dangerous military escalation, and a systemic fragility that the markets are just blissfully ignoring until it's far too late. Well, let's test that. Let's look at the headlines from just the last 24 hours. There is a clear trend toward deal-making. We're seeing a historic trade agreement between the United States and India finalized yesterday between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. We're seeing a massive vote of confidence in the future of technology with the merger of SpaceX and xAI. And even in the most hostile environments, like with Iran or Venezuela, diplomatic channels are quietly opening up. The data suggests that economic pragmatism is prevailing. I mean, the markets hate uncertainty, and leaders are finally providing something like a roadmap. That all sounds great on paper, but you have to look at the reality on the ground. You call it pragmatism, I call it the calm before the storm. You mention the deals, but you're ignoring the ticking clock. The Kremlin has explicitly warned about the expiration of the New START treaty on February 5. That's just 2 days from now. And for listeners who might not follow arms control that closely, New START is the last remaining major nuclear treaty between the U.S. and Russia. It limits the number of deployed strategic nuclear warheads. If that expires without a replacement, we are right back to the 1950s. No caps, no inspections, just an unlimited arms race. So while you look at the handshake in Washington, I'm looking at that treaty just dissolving.
Okay, we can get to the treaty, but you can't just dismiss the Washington handshake that easily. This U.S.-India trade deal, it's a massive structural shift. It's not just a photo op. This is a masterclass in using economic leverage to resolve diplomatic tension. President Trump and Prime Minister Modi have agreed to lower U.S. tariffs on Indian goods from that punishing 25% down to 18%. That is a huge relief for Indian exporters. But the quid pro, that's the real story here. India has agreed to stop purchasing Russian oil.
Wait, hold on. You're framing this as a done deal. I'm saying it's a gamble that's, frankly, likely to fail. You're just assuming Modi will actually cut off Russian oil. History shows India takes the discount wherever it can find it.
But the incentives have shifted now. This deal boosts the Indian rupee immediately, and it integrates the global south. And let's be clear, India is the heavyweight champion of the global south, deeper into a Western economic framework. By getting India to agree to this, the U.S. is effectively constricting Russia's cash flow without firing a single shot. This is how you stabilize the board. You buy the alliances you need.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. And let me tell you why. You're taking the press release at face value. The Kremlin has already come out and explicitly stated they have, and I'm quoting here, heard nothing from New Delhi about stopping oil purchases. That suggests this deal is either incredibly fragile or entirely performative. I mean, India has spent the last few years balancing perfectly between the West and Russia. Do you really think a 7% tariff reduction is enough to make them sever a critical energy lifeline? And maybe more importantly, look at the second-order effects. By trying to force India's hand, the West is essentially forcing Russia to double down on its ties with China. You aren't creating unity, you're just cementing the opposition.
You say cementing the opposition. I say defining the perimeter.
But look at the financial implications. You're splitting the world into two distinct economic spheres. Just look at President Xi Jinping's meeting with Uruguay's leader this week. Xi isn't just shaking hands, he is explicitly calling for the yuan to become a global reserve currency to bypass the dollar. He cited the stats. The yuan is only, 1.93% of global reserves, while the dollar is at 57%. He wants to change that math. This U.S.-India deal doesn't stop that trend, it accelerates the financial bipolarity. It gives the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, more reason to build their own financial pipes.
I would frame it differently. I mean, the push for the yuan is happening regardless of what Washington does. The U.S.-India deal is a defensive perimeter to ensure that when the dust settles, the world's largest democracy is inside the tent, not outside. But let's move from currency wars to the bomba, the physical reality of this competition. Because underneath the money, this is about stuff. It's about resources. And on that front, the United States is finally getting serious about its supply chains.
Is it? Or is it just writing checks?
It's strategic action. I'm talking about Project Vault. For those who missed the announcement, this is a $10 billion loan initiative from the Export-Import Bank, specifically designed to stockpile critical minerals like lithium, cobalt. We know China controls about 90% of rare earth refining. If they turn off that tap, our tech sector dies. Project Vault is a smart, strategic move to safeguard manufacturers from price shocks and, blackmail. It basically pays companies to hold inventory in friendly jurisdictions. It's responsible national security policy that stabilizes markets by ensuring we aren't dependent on a strategic rival.
Right, but that's a compelling argument. But have you considered the difference between stockpiling and owning? Project Vault is a passive measure. It's buying what's already out of the ground. It's a warehouse strategy. While the U.S. is writing checks for a warehouse, China is outmaneuvering the West in the actual extraction game, specifically in Latin America. Just look at the acquisition that went through in Brazil. Chalco and Rio Tinto bought a controlling stake in Brazil's CBA, Companhia Brasileira de Alumínio, for $886 million.
Right, but Rio Tinto is an Anglo-Australian company, though. That's a joint venture. It's not a pure Chinese monopoly play.
But Chalco, the state-owned aluminum corp of China, is the heavyweight there. And look at what they bought. They didn't just buy a pile of aluminum. They bought the infrastructure, the energy assets, the 1.6 gigawatts of installed hydro capacity that comes with CBA. While Washington stockpiles, Beijing integrates. They're owning the value chain from the mine all the way to the factory. And they're not afraid to use regulatory power as a weapon to protect that chain. Look at the new safety policy in China banning hidden car door handles.
You mean the flush handles, like on a Tesla?
Exactly. It's framed as a safety concern for emergency extraction, which, sounds reasonable, but in practice it targets foreign manufacturers like Tesla who popularized that design. It is regulatory warfare. So while you celebrate a $10 billion loan for a stockpile, the actual control of the global mineral supply chain is tightening around Brazil and shifting east, and the market access in China is being fenced off by red tape.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it ignores diversification efforts. The U.S. is making moves in Africa. It's working with allies like Japan and Australia on this. We aren't just standing still. But I want to pivot to the conflict zones because this is where your world is dangerous thesis really hinges. You're describing an economic war for resources in Brazil, but that cold economic war is turning hot in Eastern Europe. The same desperations for energy security is what drove the strike on Ukraine's grid yesterday. But even there, I see green shoots.
Green shoots? In a crater?
I see the incentives aligning for a pause. Look at the RAND Corporation analysis that was released this week. They're calling Ukraine the business opportunity of the decade, estimating a $500 billion reconstruction effort. Construction firms, energy giants, tech infrastructure, they all want in. Business interests want peace because, well, you can't build a hotel in a war zone. We even had President Zelensky initially reporting a Russian energy ceasefire. And we have Iran's President Pezeshkian expressing a willingness to negotiate with the U.S. to lift sanctions. The money is calling for a timeout.
You are cherry-picking the optimism and just ignoring the explosions. That energy truce you mentioned, it lasted less than a week. It ended yesterday with the most powerful blow of the year on Ukraine's grid. 70 missiles, 450 drones. Millions of people are without power in freezing temperatures right now. That is not a business opportunity. That is a humanitarian catastrophe. And regarding the business opportunity, the RAND report explicitly warns that without a durable peace, that $500 billion is a mirage. I mean, what insurance company on earth is going to underwrite a project in Kharkiv right now?
But the willingness to talk is there. Diplomatic channels are open. That matters.
But are they meaningful channels? Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov just warned that any European troop deployments to Ukraine would be considered legitimate targets. Sergei Shoigu is hinting at nuclear consequences again, which brings us right back to that New START treaty expiring in 48 hours. And in the Middle East, you mention Iran's willingness to talk, but look at the context. The U.S. military buildup in the region continues. Iran is demanding negotiations without threats, yet the threat of force is the only thing bringing them to the table. And let's not overlook the report that Israel has been accused of using chemical substances in southern Lebanon.
Those are allegations, to be clear.
Allegations of white phosphorus, or worse, are enough to derail any diplomatic talk in Geneva or Istanbul. That's a massive escalation. The region is a powder keg, and we're celebrating because the fuse is burning just slightly slower today?
I think you're underestimating the fatigue factor. These regimes are tired. Sanctions are biting. That is why Venezuela is back at the table after the capture of Maduro. It's why Iran is talking. The people need to eat. But let's look at where the future is actually being built. I want to talk about the consolidation of the tech sector, because this connects directly to the energy problem we just discussed. This week, Elon Musk officially merged SpaceX and xAI. We're talking about a combined entity with a valuation of $1.25 trillion.
Which is a terrifying amount of power in one man's hands.
Or a necessary leap forward. Look at the synergy. AI has an insatiable hunger for electricity. It's the new oil. By merging with SpaceX, they're aiming to solve the massive energy demands of artificial intelligence by using space-based data centers and solar arrays. They want to put the compute in orbit. This is visionary. It transcends these terrestrial squabbles over pipelines. At the same time, we have reports of Russia developing a plasma engine, a magnetoplasma rocket.
Which sounds like science fiction.
It's real physics. It uses magnetic fields to accelerate plasma to produce thrust, which is vastly more efficient than burning chemical fuel. They're claiming they could get humans to Mars in 30 days with a prototype by 2030. Competition is driving humanity off planet. These advancements create new economic frontiers that make fighting over a patch of land on Earth look, well, obsolete.
I come at it from a different way. You see new frontiers. I see systemic fragility. You're talking about space-based data centers, but let's look at the infrastructure we have right here, right now. The UN released the Invisible Highways report on undersea cables this week. These cables carry 99% of our internet traffic, the backbone of your $1.25 trillion valuation. And we're seeing 150 to 200 incidents a year where these cables are cut or damaged.
Most of those are fishing accidents, though. It happens.
Not all of them. We saw disruptions in the Red Sea recently that affected data traffic between Europe and Asia. That wasn't a fishing boat. That was geopolitical sabotage. We have a total lack of international repair protocols. It takes weeks to fix these things. And when you consolidate AI and space power into one entity, like this Musk merger, you are creating a single point of failure for the global economy. If that one ecosystem goes down, or if the cables connecting it to the ground are severed, the lights go out on the global economy. Oversight it's non-existent.
The market regulates it. If XAI fails, the stock drops, investors punish risk.
The market doesn't regulate geopolitical sabotage. And honestly, while Musk builds his empire, I was struck by a much smaller story that highlights the disparity. 2 Stanford students launching Project Breakthrough, a $2 million accelerator.
I saw that. It's a great initiative for student entrepreneurs.
It is, but it highlights the absurdity of the scale. We're relying on 2 college students with a GoFundMe, essentially, to democratize innovation, while a single oligarch consolidates $1 trillion of infrastructure. That is not a robust economy. It's an inverted pyramid. It's top-heavy and ready to tip.
I think you're viewing consolidation as inherently negative rather than just efficient. Scale allows for breakthroughs that 2 students in a dorm room simply can't achieve. You can't build a Mars rocket in a garage. But let's step back and look at the macro picture. We are in February 2026. The stock market is responding to U.S. economic data, which is positive. The Dow is up 450 points. Retailers are adjusting. We see Hong Kong retail sales edging up. The economic engine is running. My argument remains that despite the noise, and I admit the noise from Ukraine and the Middle East is loud, the structural moves are sound. Trade deals like U.S.-India, strategic stockpiles like Project Vault, and the integration of AI and space tech, they're laying the groundwork for a more prosperous world. Even the diplomatic openings in Venezuela, post-Maduro, show that economic incentives can loosen the hardest knots.
And I maintain that we are seeing a false dawn. You point to the stock market, I point to the tearing of the social fabric. And this brings me to a point we haven't touched on, but it underpins everything: trust. We saw the release of the unredacted Epstein files this week.
That is a sordid chapter, certainly, but is it geopolitical?
It's absolutely geopolitical because it reveals a deep rot within the elite circles that run these pragmatic deals. The files mention the literal tearing of the social fabric. When public trust in institutions collapses, whether it's due to corruption, privacy violations like we see with Meta being sued in New Mexico, or the sheer inability to stop a war in Ukraine, the economic numbers stop mattering. You can sign a trade deal, but if the population doesn't believe the system works for them, the deal won't hold. You mentioned Xi Jinping meeting the Uruguayan leader. Xi called for a multipolar world. Well, that's arriving. But it isn't an orderly transition. It's defined by conflict over resources, as we see in Brazil. It's defined by the weaponization of energy, as we see in Ukraine. And it's defined by a fragility in our tech infrastructure that no amount of AI valuation can fix.
We will have to see if the center holds. I believe the incentives for order, the sheer profit motive of peace, are stronger than the forces of chaos.
And I fear that chaos is becoming more profitable for some than the order.
That is all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening to the debate.
Keep your eyes open.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.